Kate, you. We. All right. Okay, it is 6:01. We'll go ahead and call to order the August 18th meeting of the Weld RE-5J Education to order. If you take a moment to silence your cell phones and rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Diagana, would you please take roll?
Monica Johnson?
Here.
Amanda Proctor?
Here.
Lisa Summit?
Here.
Amy Musgrave is absent. Michael Wales?
Here.
Liam Burak? Here. Sadie Gosha? Here.
Do you have any changes to this evening's agenda? I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion by Vice President Sassano, a second by Director Proctor to approve the as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do we have any citizen comments on agenda items? I think we're good to go at that podium? Okay. I have one name, Adrian Smith. You can, if you go over to the podium and.
I just want the option to speak when we get to that point, just after we hear about the bond measure.
So what we always do it before, so that way we can take whatever comments you have into consideration as we make.
Okay, that's fine.
And if you would, when you get there, just state your name and address for the record.
I'm Adrian Smith. I live at 2435 Schoolhouse Drive in Milliken, over here in this village. And I think I just want to bring up some concerns about the bond measures that we've seen that might be coming in November. We've had some discussion within our neighborhood and within the community about the potential for some of these measures to come out. And as a community member, and I have 3 kids in the district and one who graduated 2 years ago. My mortgage has gone up $900 in the last 6 years. Gas is nearly $1 a gallon, so asking us to pay more money is really expensive. So I think we want to understand a little bit more about what's being asked of us as community members to pay and what maybe the money that came out of our pockets previously, what that really went towards, because as we all saw with RHS, it's a beautiful school, but it looks really expensive. I had a kid who just graduated from it. It's beautiful. And I think it was a great opportunity for him, but it was a lot of money out of our pocket. So if you're asking for more money to come from us, what is that going to go towards? And how did that money that we've already spent out of our pocket be used responsibly? Because if you're going to ask us for more money, is it going to be used responsibly? Was RHS built responsibly? Are we expanding it responsibly? Community members are feeling very stretched. There's a lot of discussion about how are we going to pay for more schools? Are we going to pay for an expansion on a high school that's already at capacity a few years after it was built? So these are the things that I think I'm bringing forward on behalf of the community. I think it's really hard for us as to come to these meetings. I think a lot of members don't know that they should. I am a member of the PTO in Milliken Elementary, so I feel like I'm within the community I can speak on behalf of. So I'm doing that. I feel like I can. So, and I feel strapped for cash. So I bring it forward because I don't know that I can afford to keep doing it. So if you're going to ask us in November to vote yes, I know that a lot of community members are going to do that. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That was the only item or only speaker we had for agenda items. We will move on to staff and student celebrations and ignitions. Superintendent Nielsen.
Can I just ask you, Scott, when you start, did we get the information from the surveys? I didn't see the email that I asked for the community members.
We can share what we have. We don't have any more than we had when we talked about it last week. We don't have, in terms of community, Kate, we didn't get any extra community surveys. So the information is not any changed than what we talked about in the past. We have what we
I
have.
had just asked to see it for you guys to provide it to the board, but I didn't see it.
Okay. President Wales, board members, it's a good time of the year when we students back in buildings. I think I've talked about that each of the years I'm here, right? We spend the summer thinking about the next year. Really, we spent the last 5 or 6 months in buildings thinking about the year to come. So when you get students back in the building, it brings them back to life. And this year we have, it's no different. We have students with their senior jeans on and they're at Roosevelt, and today we started with a class of 39. So those are the kindergartners that started today. Lots of great pictures. I think Kate's been out in buildings, and so we've got some photos as we speak tonight just to show you what's happening as students start their new year. Excitement, photos with parents, drop off, meeting new teachers. It's a cool time of the year. So, thanks to staff and our leaders for getting buildings ready to roll. And in a lot of ways, a very, very smooth transition in. I know out at MIS today, talked to that school, very smooth opening this year versus last year when they were trying to change what's going on or trying to figure out how to operate. So, just a smooth start to the year and a great way to get things going. Over the last couple of weeks, I think the last time we had a chance to talk here was 2 weeks ago, and since then, we had our induction with our new staff, talented staff, chance to interact with new staff members and spend a little time with them Thursday 2 weeks ago, and they're excited in this district. And what's really cool is how excited our principals are around their new hires and the energy they're bringing to the district. Today, while a couple of them interact with community members, we had a couple of new staff members there that are super excited to be part of our district. So it's just been fun to watch and be part of that. We had the kickoff last week, and appreciate several of you being in the room or at the school one in the morning to welcome our staff back, and then the entire staff back, celebrating each other and celebrating how many years they've been in the session, but how many years they've been in 5J is pretty exciting. The other thing I'd like to celebrate, and we've celebrated this group in this room quite a bit in my 3 years and 3 days. But our FFA program at Roosevelt High School was recognized as a national 3-star chapter, which is the highest rating an FFA chapter can receive at the national level. And happens to less than 10% of the FFA programs across the state or across the nation. So, and we recognize the good work that our whole ag program does, but the FFA program as a subset is a leader. I mean, it's a leader certainly in the region, but when recognized as such, it's a leader both at the state level and nationally. And we know we have adults working with our students that are leaders and are pushing on the broader FFA community. But we also have students that are doing the same. So I wanted to let the board know that, and that's a group we should bring and something recognized. We can attach that to one of the times they're with us.
They'll be here for sure.
They'll certainly be here, but that's why, right? As they build a program, And the program is top notch. That's a good place for me to stop and let.
Any other celebrations? Now we'll just move into our board reports. Sadie, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Do I have to use the microphone or do I just like? Does anyone care?
Yeah, if you can,
Okay.
at least so if anybody's watching or
Okay.
watches the recording.
And say you don't have to talk right into it, it'll pick up.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
just let you turn it on. Yep.
All right. Yeah, awesome. So a really big thing is started, obviously. But last Thursday, I had the opportunity to attend the district off as a board member, which I thought was really fantastic and really powerful. Just seeing how many people care about these schools and are dedicated to our district. There are people that have been in our district for over 35 years, which is like a time scale that is almost unfathomable for me. But I thought that was really fantastic. And so many people came up and introduced themselves to me. Like, for example, Allie from the Cottage Collective, they were handing out backpacks at the R launch. And she went up and asked me about how we can get that more involved in our school district. So I just thought it was so wonderful seeing how many people care. Other than that, being back to school has been great. It's nice to be back at it and have something to fill my days with. And speech and debate is starting back up, and why I think that's relevant is that this board gave us the funds to go to nationals last year, and our program has just been growing and growing and growing. So I'm just so incredibly thankful for that opportunity, and all of the clubs really have a Roosevelt because not all schools have that. And I think that's all from me. Thank you.
I have had a good start to the school year as well since 2 weeks ago at our last board meeting had our August Youth Council quarterly meeting. We had some governor's office updates coming from the Department of Local Council related to how 13-17 last year, the bill to combine Department of Higher Education with all the workforce functions, EDLE, Human Services, OEdit, all these different departments that are involved with that. And also able to give updates from the group feedback sessions at the governor's office we were able to get youth involved with, as well as updates from the transition advisory committee, the committee made by that bill. We also had a couple of executive committee meetings since then on the council, and been able to talk about how our survey around the quality career pathways framework has been able to extend, including into our own district, to try to see what opportunities kids have available to them, how are they using the resources that are available to them, are they plentiful, where are the gaps, where are good things happening, and it's been really great to see actually really good genuine responses from students in our district that actually really care about the realities and the experiences that they have that will really help the council be able to really put forth real policies that these students can bring up their stories. For me.
Excellent.
Yes, I attend the kickoff, and just due to scheduling, I arrived late, left early, so that was super classy of me. But the parts that I was there for, I got to celebrate staff and their years of working, which is, I agree with Sadie, and I'm a lot older than Sadie, but I still think it's amazing that you can have a 35 to 40 year career with school districts. So that is to be celebrated. And then I got to go back to night at Roosevelt High School, which was, I always enjoy. I love meeting and interacting with teachers who will teach my student. And it's fun to see their different teaching styles, their setups. I was just really pleased to be able to be there. And then I was, it was so fun to see all of the way the schools welcome their students back. And I just really want to commend all of the schools. I know a lot of it is TO that come up with these great ideas to welcome students back. And it just warms my heart to know of Elle. I just love it. I think LL had the Yeti out. I know that MIS had a hopscotch game to welcome kids in the door. Just creative, and it's all wrapped around the notion to make kids feel loved and welcomed and wanted. So I really appreciated that. And then I submitted my obligatory first day of school photo of my student, which she's always so thrilled to do. So that was fun too, but I think that's all I have for my report.
I feel like my report is eerily similar, like ditto on everything. One thing I did want to say is with the back to school nights, it can be hard staff. For example, I think a lot of back to school nights for elementary was the night before the staff kickoff, which was an early morning. That night was RHS's. So some of those staff had little turnaround time with their families. So I appreciate them doing that. It means a lot to family members and communities to do that. I remember all the time in this district when that was not common practice to invite students in before the school year to get them in the building and make them feel comfortable. So I really do appreciate that effort a ton.
No reporting tonight.
No report for me. Just I had some fun seeing your parking spots, seeing things. So, getting back to school. That's it.
Yeah, I don't have much either. I just, thanks to everybody who's put in the work to get the buildings ready and get the classroom set up and ready for the kids. Josh is a big part of that, but everybody pulls on that first week. So just want to express my gratitude for that. Let's move on to the report from the superintendent's office.
Just a couple things tonight, President Wales and board members. One is a thank you, right? The facilities, and we've had some hiccups. I think I've heard from a couple board members heat at the high school, and that's something our team was working on since day one. And I think about it, in a good spot now, or have a workaround as we're trying to make sure it's ready to roll. We had some heat up at Pioneer Ridge before students came back that the team was working through. So there's has been plenty to work on from facilities to make sure we're up and ready to go. Transportation the same way. There's a lot of moving parts when you get transportation up and running the first 2 days of school. And that group works really hard to make sure. But every year also answering calls from family members who are asking for transportation for small distances, don't understand. So those are things they work the relationship while also maintaining, we don't have endless space on our buses. And so it's work for the transportation to do. But if you look at the students when they're getting off the buses in the morning, we have a great stable of bus drivers that really work hard to build a relationship with our students. It's pretty cool. The other thing I just share with the board is I think we talked for a while last year about using some space at MIS to get started a homeschool enrichment. And they did their kickoff today, and we had close to 16 or 17 students that looks will participate, plus some siblings that probably aren't. But then the other thing that I just want to share with the board, and there's further conversation, but I at least want to make sure you know the conversation has been started. There's a homeschool group that from this town that had been plugged into District 49 and to a BOCES down in southern Colorado. And that BOCES board on Monday night closed all of the homeschool programs outside of their district. So that impacted the program here. So we invited the sponsor of that program to the kickoff today, had a conversation with her. For me, I've had a chance to look at the contract they had with that BOCES, and we'll engage staff in trying to figure out is there a way for us to partner district. There's some talk about working with BOCES a year from now, but that would be a year from now. And so what happens in the moment and trying to figure out if and when we can be reached out with that. So that is ongoing and probably a further conversation that we'll like you to be involved in and potentially help us make a decision on. So, and likely as she walked through and got to see what we're doing for enrichment in that building, she was blown away. The spaces there are incredible for that. And she got to see, they got to see some students engaging in the music room and in the smart lab. And so that's pretty cool for her to come. Their program happens to be the academic side of the house, and it's mornings, 2 days a week. And ours happens to be 2 days in the afternoon. So her thought was that they would, knowing that that's going on, would have some families be interested in the enrichment program with us as well. So more to follow, but I thought I at least would let you know that that decision made, and that does impact. It's about 50 students. I think 50. They're not all Milliken students, but there's a good chunk that are from Johnstown. There's some from Windsor and some from Loveland. I don't know a whole lot more about all of where they're from. Those are the city or the districts that she shared with me. They have students from. So ongoing dialogue around that. I think that's a good spot for me to close tonight. Answer questions.
Good question on the Southern Colorado BOCES issue. 49. That's Springs, isn't it?
Hay, which is east of Springs.
Yeah.
30 miles or something. It's a pretty small district.
That one's kind of news to me.
And they had, 500 students or something like that. They were doing homeschool from all over the state, and they were the host, and there was some arrangement. So Peyton is District 49, but there was some arrangement with one of the boys down there. That was the.
So that's not even talking about the Arvada or Aurora Public School deal that.
No.
Okay, that's BOCES is working on as well for Centennial. BOCES is working on as well. Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's what more to follow, I think. And what we heard today before I had a chance to talk was because districts are standing up their own, much like we are. There's not this niche for these districts that were out in front 8-10 years ago who were able to pull people in from all over the state and benefit from that in some sense, right? Because the homeschool is happening at Grace Church. So it's Grace Church. The money from the state is going through some district down by Colorado Springs. And then they're overseeing some, and the rest of them gets passed through to the people leading that and the they've hired. And so it's fascinating to see it, but it's an opportunity for us to think about how a branch that the district can provide. So more to follow.
Yeah, that enrichment will definitely be kind of the foothold on that. Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure for consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Most of the items listed in the consent agenda have gone through board review and recommendation. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to board members and the public in advance to ensure an extensive review. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a member. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Director, a second by Director Johnson to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes. Move on to our first item of special business. It is the designation of a designated election official. Superintendent Nielsen.
President Weld, members, in the event that later in the agenda, the board makes a decision that we're going to put anything on the ballot, Jessica Diagana has, as she has done several years in the past, has agreed to be this individual to be our election official. We've attached a resolution if the board would so choose.
Any questions about that?
Jessica, how much work does that entail for you?
It's just a lot of coordination with Weld County and Larimer County, because we have a very small constituent in Larimer County. Checking voter addresses to make sure every address that both entities have lie within our district. Transitioning the ballot language, pro-con statement, stuff like that.
Okay. Can I ask a question? I may be just confused. The resolution that's under the designated election official, is that not the correct resolution? Am I confused? It could be a me issue. The top of that one says for participation in coordinated election.
Yeah, I think that's the resolution from 2 weeks ago that we had to put in if we wanted to be on the ballot. So the resolution is probably not the right one. Unless this one also designates you as the.
It does, and under item number 4.
Okay, thank you. But like,
This
I
was prepared by our attorney.
that's fine. I was reading and I was like, I don't see Jessica's name anywhere. But thank you for showing me where it is. It was a
And then it
me.
talks about the expectation of all the district to the IGA.
Thank you. It was a me issue. Thank you.
Well, I'll move to approve the designation of Jessica Diagana as a designated election official for Weld County School District RE-5J for the November 3rd, 2026 special election, and authorize her to perform the duties and responsibilities of the designated election official as required by Colorado law.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Johnson, a second by Vice President Sassano, to approve the designation of Jessica Diagana as the designated official. Any discussion on that motion? Excuse me. Ms. Diagana, would you please pull the board?
Monica Johnson,
Yes.
Amanda Proctor,
Yes.
Nathan Sano,
Yes.
Amy Musgrave, yes, Michael Whale.
Yes. Congratulations. Do it. We don't have a cake, do it.
We might not need it.
Why not need it? Okay. We'll go on to our next item, which is the consideration of an intergovernmental agreement with Larimer County and Weld County.
Again, we've attached those resolutions. If you have questions, I think Ms. Diagana could answer those, but we're asking that you approve that we step into a IGA with both Larimer and Weld in the event that you make a decision to move forward with a ballot question.
Any questions on that one?
I'll move to approve the intergovernmental agreements for Larimer and Weld County for November 3rd, 2026 coordinated election. Authorize the appropriate district officials to execute the agreement.
I have a motion by Director Proctor, second by Vice President Sassano, to consider the two intergovernmental agreements with Larimer County and Weld County regarding coordination and administration of the November 3rd, 2026 election. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Diagana.
Monica Johnson,
Yes.
Amanda Faulkner,
Yes.
Susan Casano,
Yes.
Amy Musgrave,
Yes.
Michael Bell.
Yes.
So our next three items, before we get into those, I had some things I'm thinking about over the last week and, well, more than the last week, but with our retreat and everything, it kind of helped me pull some of this all together. I don't usually do prepared statements, so I do have kind of a prepared statement because I want to make sure I hit everything right here. But you know, as we consider these resolutions, I want to take a moment to talk about, you know, the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place. And I understand that anytime the school district begins talking about mill levy override or a bond project, there's going to be strong reactions, and that's because these are significant questions. They affect taxpayers, they affect our families, they affect our schools, they affect our students, and really affect the futures of this community. And so because of that, they deserve scrutiny and they deserve a thoughtful discussion. But I also think it's important to recognize that having this discussion is part of the job the five of us got elected to do. Over the past several years, the board has made a very deliberate effort to become more thoughtful and more forward-looking about the long-term needs of the district. We established a long-range planning process and a committee because we just didn't want to wait for the problems to arise at our doorstep like they have in the past and then try to react to them. So we asked a lot of people to start looking forward. What are our enrollment trends telling us? How are our demographics changing? What is the condition of the facilities we already own? Will those facilities need 5, 10, or 20 years from now? What educational opportunities do we want to be able to provide our students, and what do we need to do today so that we can continue educating the children in this community at least as well as we do today, preferably better? And so we asked our staff to provide that information. We asked the members of the long-range planning committee to dig into those plans, examine the data, evaluate the facilities, consider potential products, and help us understand both the needs and the options available to us. And they have done that work. So now it becomes our responsibility as a board to take the information we asked for and decide what to do. That does not mean that every identified need automatically becomes a project. It does not mean that every project automatically becomes a ballot question. And putting a question on the ballot certainly does not mean that this board is unilaterally deciding to spend money. It means that we've reached the point where we determine whether a need is significant enough, a plan is reasonable enough, and the timing is appropriate enough to take the question to the people we represent, and allow them to make a final decision. This is how the process is supposed to work. Governance is not waiting for a roof to fail or a bill to become unusable or enrollment being overwhelmed our facilities capacities before we even begin planning for it. Good governance means identifying problems while still have choices. It means maintaining the investments this community has already made in the schools so that repairs remain an option rather than allowing problems to deteriorate until replacement becomes the only and much more expensive alternative. And it means thinking not only about the students sitting in our classrooms today, but about the children who will walk through those doors 5 and 20 years from now. I want to thank this board for being willing to think that way. I want to thank our staff for doing the work necessary to support dining, and I especially want to thank our long-range planning committee for the time invested and will continue to invest, and the questions they've asked and they have done on behalf of this community. I want to thank our community, including those who may ultimately disagree with what decision we make tonight. Public scrutiny is appropriate. Questions are appropriate and debate is appropriate. but I hope we can also recognize that planning ahead, evaluating needs, and protecting the investments taxpayers have already made, and then bringing significant questions back to the voters is not a failure of steward. That is stewardship. Our responsibility tonight is not to predetermine how the community should vote. Our responsibility is to determine whether the information before us demonstrates that these are questions the community deserves the opportunity to answer. And that is the responsibility I believe we should all take very seriously. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to say that. Our first item is the consideration of a resolution regarding continuation of the existing mill levy override, MLO, ballot question. Superintendent Nielsen.
President Wales and members, I'm confident I got some feedback. We don't have a lot of feedback, but the feedback we have is to be supportive of the projects, but less urgent. Some of the feedback we got back recently, which again is a handful, is a little less urgent, although we talked with the board at one of the meetings that the urgency even from our staff was less than the need was, right? The need was felt higher than the urgency was. So that theme seemed to carry through. That felt like projects seemed to be pretty solid, and that the urgency to do it in 26 might not have as much as it is the importance of the project. Does that make sense? It's not like it's a burning hole that has to happen today. It's how the feedback goes. The other thing I want to share with the board is we not received formal preliminary assessed valuation yet, but Rusty last Friday was able to reach out and get us the preliminary to the preliminary. And for our district, it's not good news. The assessed valuation went down, and so if you think about all the presentations we've done, when the assessed valuation goes down, and really that's because of oil and gas in this district, and true across all Weld County. Some counties, the oil and gas has helped put up. In our district, it's dropped. So for us, it's dropped around 10%. And so I think that's important that we take that into consideration tonight. As you look at all three questions, the first question you're going to look at is the sunset. And that ballot question still is a question that is without a new tax. The second question you're going to look at tonight is the question we talked about being able to keep mill levies roughly the same. Because of that assessed valuation, it will generate far less money that would help the operational side. The guess, and again, because it's preliminary to the preliminary, Dan with RBC felt like it would, instead of a little over $2 million, that it would probably be around $500,000 that it would generate. And then of course, the third question is the bond, and the bond would be asking for a tax increase. So just as we think about those three, I thought it was important that the board know that, and we were thankful to Rusty that he was able to get that before we were supposed to get it, and he didn't have it. So I appreciate Rusty you reaching out and getting that information so we make sure as you're thinking about things tonight.
And Scott, just a question for you. Rusty might have the answer as well. The assessed value, at least last year, we looked at last week, was 1.2 billion. Is that correct? And then now it'd be about $1 billion or 1 point. Is that about correct?
1.1.
Okay, thank you.
And Rusty, I'm correct in saying it's really the oil and gas.
It is. I spoke with a lady in the assessor's office, and she just did a first review, and she said it's all oil and gas. But that's as much as she had to share with me. But I do expect the initial preliminary valuation to come out this week, if not this week, next week. And so maybe we'll have some more insight as to where the variations are.
But that felt like it was pertinent for each of the decisions you're gonna discuss tonight.
I always have to laugh. It's so funny. Education finance in Colorado, and I suppose it's this way in states that operate under the same system, but we're asked to make a budget before we know how many students we have. We're asked to commit to a ballot issue before we know what the AV is. We have to commit before we know all the facts on a lot of this stuff. So that always just, that's amusing if anything.
So how much is it going to change between the preliminary to the actual preliminary to the actual value? How much uncertainty is there?
I have a pretty good sense that our preliminary that hasn't come out yet is probably pretty accurate, that they're not gonna change much. What it changes between now and the final is closer to December.
Yes.
So I don't know, Sadie, I think it's a fair question, what will happen between now and then. But what we got last week, we think is pretty accurate.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, it's rare. It's rarely ever been a radical shift preliminary to what the final comes out at. So the first question before us, of course, is continuing of the current mill levy override, and it's removing the sunset. It's set to expire on that. So right now that mill levy provides the district with an additional $4 million in revenue every year. That sunsets in 2030. Of course, we're going a little early in case it doesn't, so we can build a better campaign for another election. But I mean, of all the three options that we're talking about tonight, I think that's, we've kind of discussed this ad nauseum, but we'll do it one last time here. For me, that one is the most important one, because that one directly affects the status quo of operations in the district. And if that one doesn't pass, then we have some backup plans that we have to start working towards, and I mean that includes preparing to cut $4 million in the budget by 2030.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I appreciate the community giving the district voting yes for the mill levy override for the sunset. I think as a district, we improved class sizes, kids' access to programming. I think to cut that would be a significant loss to our community in more ways than one. As much as I wish that we'd be able to hold on to everything, I don't believe that would be possible to just the most urgent filling item.
I think it's important to remember what we used those dollars for when they were asked in 2020. Really, safety and security, that was the big piece of it. It was buses. We added 4 buses, I think, from that low dollars initially. And it was staff. It was investing in our staff to make them better teachers so that they are having better outcomes teaching our kids, our students better. Initially, that was done with the instructional coaches. That's shifted a little bit now to curriculum and a couple other more directly in the classroom options. But if that funding was to go away, it's not to say that those are the things that would be cut, but those are things we use those dollars for as a response to what the community was asking us for at the time. And I don't think those asks have changed. I think if you went to the community and said, where should we spend our money? Say in security, transportation, making classroom teachers better. I think those 3 things are really, really important. That's what we're up here to do. So I think asking the community to extend this funding is right. There's no impact on your tax bill other than the fact that it lasts longer. It would have sunsetted, it won't now if this were to pass. But I think that is a good investment in our students. the long-term health of this district, continuing to provide the education we want to provide to our students.
So there is a tax impact though, because they would get we would get a tax cut essentially if we don't do this. And I wasn't on the board. So what was the rationale of doing the sunset? We thought we needed this money long term.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was, there was concern that if we didn't sunset it, it wouldn't pass.
And I remember, I mean, I've told you guys this before. I was a single mom when this all went through. My bill more than doubled since this has passed. And I know it's not all related to this, but we're asking a lot at a really difficult time for people financially. And this was asked of me at a horrible time financially. I not vote for it. I had a really hard time. So I've really struggled with this one because of the work that's been done. I love products. I've also asked for some financial information that I did not receive that I wanted to look at to make sure I felt really comfortable about how we're spending money, what we're doing with our money. I'm really struggling with this. I know what we want to do with it. I just am not sure about the timing here. I've never voted tax increase. Of course, and all of the feedback I've received, save one person, has been absolutely not. So I wanted to see the feedback from the district because I know my circle's small, the people who contact me, that's small. But I was a little shocked, and I went through the time of explaining, because I think a lot of people have the wrong impression on how our current mill levy works. Went into some very in-depth conversations, and I did not receive the positive feedback that I thought I would. So that's what I have to say about this. I don't like it. I'm struggling.
I think the good thing about this is the decision ultimately is not ours. The decision is all the voters. So having something on the ballot doesn't mean it's going to pass. What that does is it gives the choice to our stakeholders, to the community, to those that play an active role in our community. And so I love that aspect is we have to make hard decisions. It's our job to be able to provide opportunities for the district. Ultimately, the community has to make these decisions. But I see our role as providing opportunities for the community to speak through the election process.
One of the things I just want to say from staff's perspective, and board members, you've heard this from me before, but as you think about President Weld, we talked about a little bit of the school finance, right, and how it's behind the eight ball. But I also want to say that board members make a decision for future boards. So as we're sitting here 5 years or 6 or 7 years ago, it made a decision now you're having to wrestle with. And that's true. Future boards will have to wrestle with whatever it is. This is an interesting one because the other two areas you're talking about potentially could add or move the district forward. This one is really holding the district stable on some level, and $4 million, as we see in our own pocketbooks, falls behind every. So the purchasing power, just to think about the teachers we can afford with $4 million today is different than it was 5 or 6 years ago. So I think that's important for the board to consider as you think about not just this board, but the boards And the dilemma for us, this board is sitting here as a group of 5 for 2 elections. And then it's a new board. And this is a question for us that the district, as we look at it as staff, is there's a financial challenge that's big for the district. It is not very far away as we think about planning. And as I think I expressed before, likely if you're looking at a $4 million cut, you want to price that out over a couple of years. And so you start looking at how do you position the district to do that, so you're not taking a $4 million hit in 1 year. At least that's what you would attempt to do. So I just, as we think about it's attempting the status quo. I guess the last thing that popped into my head that I think is important, just put it in the public, is when we passed it and the board was talking about transportation and buses, our average age of bus in this district was close to 17 years old. That was the average. The average, when we get the new buses in this year, the ones that we went out and got a grant to bring in, so the buses will be free. The average age of our buses in the district now will be under 5. So between the buses that were purchased with the mill levy, plus the 6 buses we're getting for free, that has changed the game for transportation and positioned us for a long time. You're a long ways away from having your average age of a bus back to 15 years. So just a comparison between the buses that we were able to purchase with the mill levy. We've purchased more than 4 since the mill levy was passed, and then we're getting 6 now. So that's a stark difference in just positioning for the district. The other thing I think is important is how many students prior to the work that the board did to up our spaces, the number of students that were exiting our district to go elsewhere. We're starting to bring some of the students back, in some cases faster than I think the demographer thought. Well, that's some of what we wrestled with in long-range planning. Is our demographer was thinking we would continue to look like we looked before. And both at Roosevelt Middle and Roosevelt High, we brought back more students that were going to Loveland schools. Most of them are going to Loveland schools. Some are going to Greeley schools, but they're coming back to their home schools. And it's also allowed us to get all of our Milliken families back in Milliken, the work that's been done. So I just think those are contextually important modifications that have been made to the district in the last 6 years.
No, and I think the discussion we had earlier with homeschool families, recognizing the quality of the enrichment programs that are being offered now and wanting to get involved in that 10 years ago was not, I mean, that was a non-starter. I mean, nobody was going to talk about that. Guys, and I apologize because I didn't make this really clear. So we'll take these as 3 separate items tonight. We're not going to try to loop them together or we'll just take them as separate items. So I just don't want you guys to feel committed to like one or the other and feel like you can't do anything. So.
All right, we're on item C still, correct?
Yeah.
All right, I'll move to approve the resolution authorizing submission of the proposed override ballot question to eligible electors of Weld County School District RE-5J at the November 3rd, 2026 election, including the ballot language presented to the board.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Director Proctor, a second by Director Johnson to approve the resolution authorizing the submission of the proposed mill levy override ballot question to eligible electors in the November 3rd, 2026 election. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Diagana.
Monica Johnson,
Yes.
Amanda Factor,
Yes.
Nate Fasano,
Yes.
Amy Musgrave,
No.
Michael West.
Yes. So the motion carries. Our next one is the consideration of the resolution regarding the additional mill levy override. Superintendent Nielsen.
I guess only I'd ask what I talked about earlier is this one really was impacted, will be impacted by the assessed valuation So it would be a tax increase, and it would generate, you know, we'll say roughly $500,000. Again, they don't have exact, but that was their guess when we talked to them yesterday on the phone, was around $500,000. That's a big difference, just contextually. So, and then any questions that you have, otherwise.
This one is interesting because the verbiage is increase, and it's in government, we work in buckets of money that have different stipulations. It's like having 5 household checkbooks, and each checkbook has its goals for what you can use. That's what governmental fund accounting is. Currently, these are sitting in our bond fund already. We're already getting this money. It's already in the bond fund. And this particular ballot question is to ask if we can move a piece from bond fund and put it in the gen fund so that we can use it for a lot of different things. The bond fund has its own stipulation that we use that to pay very specific things. Rusty can correct me, but I believe it's principal and interest payments. Maybe a little else over that, I don't know. But when it's in the gen fund, we can use it for utilities and debt payoff if we want, because the gen fund can put money into any of these little checking accounts, but the other checking accounts are kind of walled off. So it is interesting ballot language. But with the assessed values, we talked about this prior. It's 1.71 mils, isn't a ton of mils, isn't going to generate a ton of revenue. But it goes back to the question I know that we talked about during the retreat is this the right time? Because my suspicion is that if we do the bond does pass, refuse down, we may need to ask for mills. And asking the voters for 1.71 right now, it's such a little amount. It's like a little kind of like paper cut on every household. It feels like a lot of effort for not a lot of gain. And that sounds silly because $500,000 is a lot of money. That's at least 5 staff salaries. That's at least a bus. That's at least making ahead on things. But that one I'm a little bit more unsure of now with the new information, because it's also like I feel like the sunset in asking for a bond that potentially could be a lot, and it's not my decision of whether the voters want or don't want the 1.71. It's just our decision to pose that question to voters. It's kind of interesting conundrum.
I agree with you on that. I would never try, as my grandfather used to always say, they'll tell you in school, don't take money from strangers, and he would say, I'm here to tell you, it's offering you money, you take it. And I feel like anytime we get the opportunity to take money in the school district, let's take it. But I agree with you. It's again, kind of going back to what I was saying. The timing might not be right on that one. And with the change in assessed valuation, or the potential change, let's say, the preliminary change, that kind of reinforces that thought in my mind.
We still have that money. It's just in a
Right.
different checking account.
Right. We're using that money to pay our debt off a little faster.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's why it's interesting to me. It's like, well, we already have it in the checking account. I just don't know if I want to make the transfer.
Right.
And would this extend only for debt?
No. No, because there's like with that debt payments, kind of like your mortgage, right? You have your debt payment schedule, and then you can throw an extra $100 at it if you want.
Now, if we're going to move forward with this one, I wish we could write the questions in, because again, most people don't understand. I didn't for a long time, that it's already being paid. This money is already being collected from homeowners and property owners. But again, I'm just not sure it's the right time to ask to shift that money, because it is confusing. It will confuse people. There's going to be a lot of tax initiatives on the ballot that aren't from us, from the state, from county. There'll be all kinds of places where people are asking for for dollars. I think putting this one on the ballot this year probably is not the right decision. We can see what the assessed valuation does next year. Maybe we ask again, that's appropriate. But I think we're in agreement that it's probably not the right time to ask for this one.
I'm wondering if someone that can explain it better than me can just explain it why we're in a public meeting, because it was so beneficial for my understanding the differences between the two mill levies. And the chatter in the community is, some of the chatter has been, with growth in our community, we should have enough money. And so I think it's an important piece of that puzzle to explain the difference between the two. And
let me one thing
yes,
before
please.
you go in the full, because and that's a great thing to bring up, because that current mill levy, the one that we just voted on. So I think the one thing that people really need to understand in the public is that growth doesn't equal new dollars to the school district. What it does is it takes that pie money that we get and it makes the pieces smaller, so everybody pays just a little bit less, but we still get this amount. So on that one there, that's a $4 million tax we get. The more people that come into the community there's more people contributing to that $4 million. So, you know, if it was $100 and you had 4 guys, everybody's paying $25 to make it 100. But when you get 4 more guys in there or 10 more guys in there, then everybody's still paying, everybody pay a little bit less. We still only get the $100, or in this case, $4 million. So as the community grows, that particular tax actually goes lower for each, that tax burden goes lower for each homeowner as more people come in and paying their share of it. And that's because that one is tied to dollars, not, it's how many mills does it take to get those dollars. The other one, I'll hand over to Scott, is opposite. It's tied to mills, so it's how many dollars does it take to get to those mills.
So I think what they put up on the screen is what we talked about the last couple of meetings, I think, right? That the structure A, what we're operating under right now. So in 2021, voters approved an 8.85 mil. Well, that's how many it took to generate 4.5 million. We had a 500,000 from 2003. So in order to generate the 4.5 mils today, or 4.5 million today, it's funny to me, mills and million that has been cumbersome and talked about. Is on an individual household is 3.5 mils instead of 8.85. So it's been cut by almost 60%, you know, and so that's the structure we live under today, and that will be $4 million in perpetuity, and it will also be the $500,000 in perpetuity. Well, the $500,000 is already in perpetuity. The question you just approved is asking voters to make the $4 million in perpetuity in structure A. That never changed. So when we get a new Buc-ee's in town, and Buc-ee's generates a ton of tax revenue, what it does is it makes
property tax revenue, not sales tax revenue. You got to be careful what taxes you're talking about, because again, that checkbook and all those.
Yeah, it is divvying it up over more pies, right? Buc-ee's takes on this pie. Oil and gas has been a huge help since the bill was passed in 2020, because we've seen a tremendous ramp up in oil and gas, and they pay a large percentage of the $4 million. And so as their valuation drops, because they pay a large percent, it has a big impact. Structure B is the one we've been talking about for the district to look at, which should be tied to mills, and would then ask voters at some point in time, you're considering asking in 2026 or potentially down the road, you could look at structure B. It would ask voters to say, if we would have done structure B in 2021, we would have asked them to do 8.85, and that would have stayed consistent. It would have still been 0.85, and that would have generated a little over $11 million in the current year instead of the $4.5 million. So those are the two different structures. Many school districts go with structure B, and it lets the mill levy go up with the district as it grows. And so just two different ways to do it. There are some who structure A is what they use, and some in structure B is what they use. We currently have both ours that we have currently on the left side. You want to go to the next slide? That really is what we've already talked about, right? Is the $500,000 from 2003, the $4 million from 2020, and that's the one that ends in 2030. We can go to the next slide. And board members, you've all seen this, so if you feel like there's one of these that makes the most sense, this is just talking about what I think you heard President Wales say earlier, other board members, right? Is if the 4 million ends in 2030, there are things we have to decide as a district. Your biggest expense in a district is your staffing. Your biggest staffing cost are classroom staff. So hard to get to 10% of your budget without somehow taking staff out of the classroom. I know there's been questions around trimming other places, which certainly we would attempt to do, the district would attempt to do. And it's hard to do that without impacting opportunities in the classroom, of the classroom experiences when it's that big of a cut. Next slide. This just shows the population growth that we've seen in our district is up 15%. Most of the communities around us, if they're up at all, it's up in the low single digits. That's rapid growth to be up that fast. But what's really been rapid is going from $5 million in assessed valuation to close to 1.3 in 2024. Is what and so just thinking about that, that would have doubled in that amount of time when our percentage of population is only 15%. So I just shared that with the board the last couple of weeks. Next slide. This is what you're talking about right now. That $2.2 million now would be ongoing, but instead of it saying $2.2 million, it's more like $500,000 based on the drop in assessed valuation. Those numbers were figured out given last year's assessed valuation. And then there was talk, I think, when Dan was with us this week, that the assessed valuation might go up, which might have made the 2.2 go up a little bit instead when we learned that it's the other way around. Next slide. I think this is an important, these next three slides are important because I do think they matter as how they dance together, right? You get what President Wales just talked about, right, is all of those entities break up what we ask to fund the school district. When assessed valuation goes up, the ask to the residential tax impact goes down. Next slide is when neutral, that things stay flat, and when they go down, when the assessed valuation for the district, all of everything in the district goes down, then the draw, the way we've done things, the draw on the residential tax impact is up. And again, that's, in some sense, because we're in the A category where the things that are not residential that are helping to make up the $4 million, that shrunk, which means the pieces left to make up the $4 million grew. So just important, I think, to talk about how they dance together. Anything else? Those are the slides you've seen over the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
With the assessed value decrease, I know it's hard to speak in certainties, but what impact would that have? Let's say that we've already voted on it and it's starting to be imposed on taxpayers. What would that mean in particular for taxpayers with an assessed value decrease?
On the new one?
On this current one that we're talking about, theoretically, because yeah.
So the mill will be the same. but the amount that it increases in funding would be much less.
Really, since we're already collecting that in the bond fund, there shouldn't be a total bottom dollar line impact because it's already being collected for the bond fund, but this is just asking for the monies to be shifted into the general fund. So it really shouldn't impact. And because it's a floating mill, as our assessed valuation goes up and down, so would the amount of revenue collected from those mills.
The one benefit to this question, if we were to put it on ballot and it were to pass, it is a way to ensure that new growth pays its way. Because right now, the pie's the same, but your piece gets smaller. In this instance, the pie gets bigger every time a house goes up or a business moves in. That to me is the only benefit of doing it like this. But I think the question about timing is still very valid. Mm-hmm. So procedurally, if we don't want to put this on the ballot, do we have to have a motion to deny it, or do we just not do it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if there's no call for a motion, then
Let's move on.
move on. I mean, if somebody wants to, I mean, for say that they want to deny it, then I mean, we have that prerogative as well, but,
I would like to vote on it, so I do a motion. I move to deny the resolution on resubmission of proposed mill levy. Make sure I'm on the right one. I'm not on the right one. Yes, I am. It says mill levy override ballot question. What paper says, but I move to deny the resolution authorizing the submission of proposed mill levy ballot question to the eligible electors of Weld County School District RE-5J at the November 3, 2026 election.
well, my Director Musgrave to deny,
I'm going to second.
and second by Director Johnson. Any discussion on the motion?
So just procedurally, if we vote yes, we're voting to deny.
That is correct.
Ballot.
That is correct.
Just want to make sure.
Any other questions on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Diagana.
Monica Johnson,
Yes.
Proctor,
Yes.
Nate Fasano,
Yes.
Amy Musgrave,
Yes.
Michael Webb.
Yes. So again, to add to the confusion, the motion carries. But the resolution does not.
Can you put a slide of this? Oh, you go down. Go down.
Okay, so our next item is the consideration of a resolution regarding a bond measure. Superintendent Nelson.
I think, I probably don't have anything to add other than what we've already talked about. I think I'd love to hear the conversation dialogue, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't have any further information.
All right, I'll start again. So during a retreat, I don't write down a lot of things when we talk, but this was really interesting to me. Since 2020 through 2025, we don't know our student count now. Our student count across the entire district has increased 15.6%, and our certified teacher count has increased 12.1%. So that was really interesting to me, and I appreciate you bringing those numbers. Which that 15.6% almost matches that growth side that we had in there as well. Our district has grown quite a lot. We've been able to attract those students back into our district. When I look at the bond capital project list and let's think long-term planning committee. And we knew this when I go back and looked at stuff from the 2020 bond, I knew that that bond wasn't enough to do everything. We knew it would do most of things. It would do most of it. And we ended up having to cut from projects because as we started building in a very escalated construction time where prices were escalating quite greatly in the construction industry. And on average, from the Engineering News Record construction cost indice, if anybody is super nerdy and wants to look that up, 1-year average in Colorado per building increase is 7%. And that includes the escalated time period between 2020 and 2022 as well. And so when I this bond list of needs that the long-term committee has brought to us, I talk to the families, I walk through the buildings, I see your student head count, I think about what it was like before we did the 2020 bond projects. I remember being kind of disappointed in prior boards prior to 2020 that they saw the needs and they didn't choose to address the needs. And I feel like with the long-term planning committee, we've asked to continue to look at our buildings and address these needs. And we increase almost 600 students in 6 years. We've got to keep going because I do not want to sit on a board where we're like, the roof is falling in. Like, I don't want the district to that point. And when we get to that point with 7% escalation, this list just gets more expensive. And so I want to be, I feel like we have a great board. We have great community members, we have great staff. I feel like it's a great time to do them on projects. I feel like their needs. I'm making a gross assumption because we would make this decision later, but with the past bond, we had a committee that oversaw what the bond proceeds were being spent on as kind of side, what do you call that? Bond oversight committee, thank you. I hope that we would set up the same one this time because I think that's very important. And to be, that bond oversight committee doesn't have board members on it for a reason. It's a community meeting. Anyways, I appreciate the work that's gone into it. This list, when we looked at the list that the long-term committee had and the list of repairs that we still need to do in our schools, that list is so long. It is longer than what this bond could potentially cover. Like, there's still another one to come after this, especially if the growth continues. So I'm very in favor of the bond because I don't want to address needs when water is falling from the ceiling or when we have trailers outside of every building. I want to address it now and not later. And it's never going to be cheaper than now. Unfortunately, that's just where we're at in price escalations.
I agree with that on the construction costs, but I worry a great deal about taxpayer costs. And so it's a really hard scale to balance because construction costs we know will not go down, but I also really respect what people are paying out of taxes. Yeah. So it is a really difficult scale to balance because we know we are going to need to do capital projects for improvement. And how do we weigh that out with taxpayers, with families, with single moms, with single dads, with two parents working to try to make ends meet? And so this one is a real hard one for me to wrestle with because I recognize the cost of living has gone up extraordinarily in our area, particularly in our state too.
So I looked at that number, we're up 581 students. Mm-hmm. If you go back over COVID, we're up 352 students. So that was, I was looking at the numbers, and that was interesting to me as I'm thinking through the timing of this process. And we will, post-COVID, getting our numbers back up. but it's 350 people back.
Okay.
So just, I found the news. I'm not sure on the timing on this either. I would have liked to see, you know, a past board pass something that didn't have a sunset, didn't have, I like the structure of things like that. Thinking of what we should ask for and the timing of when we should ask it. Like if we don't get if the full like for sunsets, like asking for a real ask, not a 1.7 ask, like a real ask. We're gonna ask for what we actually want and make it real and long term and but yeah, I just throw that number at you. I thought it was interesting.
Appreciate it.
So, Amanda, you're right. It's never going to be cheaper to do these projects. And I said this a week ago, I said 2 weeks ago, but as we sit today, those projects are the right projects. And they're not our wish list. These projects came from a group of very hardworking citizens who sat hours and hours and hours of meetings and analyzed trends, analyzed data, and said, what's the right answer for our district today? This is what they came up with. So I don't want the impression out there that we just sat in a back room and said, you know what would be a great idea? Let's build out Roosevelt High School. No, this is a response to what's happening at Roosevelt High School, what's happening at MIS, what's happening at PRE, all those places on that list. So it's not just our wish list. And what I think taxpayers need to understand is that if we don't approve this and don't ask for this tonight, we probably will in a year. These trends aren't changing now, or haven't changed in the last few years. It may only be 300 students, but it's still 300 students, still 500 students. So I'm with you all. I think I'm not convinced the time is right now, but these projects are the right projects for our district as we sit today. What might change that is enrollment trends for the next year or two. And my concern, I've always said when it comes to, especially in range planning, I don't want to sit on a board that makes a decision that 10 or 20 years from now, a board goes, man, I wish they hadn't that. I wish they hadn't built out Roosevelt High School. Because now the trend is showing us 10 years from now that we need a high school in Milliken, perhaps, or whatever the case is. So I'm really cautious about that. I don't want to put a future board in a bind like we are now about sunsetting funding. So that said, I think in my mind, the best solution now is to wait a year, maybe to look at enrollment trends, especially at the high school, and see it's better to spend the money building out Roosevelt High School, adding, 10 classrooms, I think we were talking about, or is money better spent on another building in Milliken or wherever the demand says it needs to be? A lot of districts around us are looking at 612 buildings. So maybe that's the right answer in a year or two. I don't know, but that's one thing I would encourage. If we don't move forward with the bond tonight, I encourage the Long Range Planning Committee to continue to look at those trends and make sure that we're doing the right things for our districts. I don't want to be here. I won't be sitting in the, but I don't want to be in this community 20 years from now going, I wish in 2026 they had done X, Y, Z. So I think we do have the opportunity to set the direction for a long time for this district. And I just want to make sure it's the right direction. And I think another year or two, while it will cost us more, inevitably, buys us that time to make sure that it's the right decision for the district long term.
Scott, if this passed on the ballot in November, let's say, best case scenario, would the expansion at MIS be done?
The expansion at MIS, I think they would tell us 18 months. It's possible it could be ready to go second semester of 27. I think construction without having done work ahead in November, so having to go through the planning and the building out of the plan before you get ahead of it, I think they would say we would have classrooms available for fall of 28, I think is what construction people say about both Roosevelt. Now, I have asked some questions just knowing where the board was trying to understand. Say if you decided to go with Roosevelt and you decided to do it in a year, is it possible because you're putting 10 classrooms on the end of one of those fingers that it could be ready faster than that? And the answer has been possible. That's something that could be looked at. It's possible with MIS, given the way we looked at it, the way long-range planning is set it up right now with the building out back. It's possible it could be faster. It's just hard when you start thinking about school years because it's not likely going to be ready by fall of 27, which is 8 months or whatever. And so are you able to move in that kind of building? You could move in mid-year because it's a building attached to a building. So, but I'd say we would probably hear the timeline would take us to the start of school 2028.
Okay. And another question I have with the build out of Roosevelt High School, I know this year we've had less steeper incline of enrollment in Roosevelt. We're still increasing students. If we don't do the bond or if the bond doesn't pass, where do we put students?
Well, I think there is still space. I think the high school staff probably feels like it's full, but there's still classes that are accessible today. There's likely the ability to put smaller classes in smaller classrooms and bigger classes in bigger classrooms. But I think there is certainly a possibility that we could need a modular or two by 2028. I think by this year, I think we can get through. It's looking like 2027 into 2028. But 2028 is possible. But I think the Director Sassano's perspective, even to yours, Director Proctor, we could end up flat this year. You know, the high school tends to peak early. Most high schools do. They peak between now and the middle of September. And then as you're going through and taking a look at moves and have people who step out, high schools tend to drop slightly. And we're not up very much. So we could end up flat year over year. If we ended up flat this year, we ended up flat next year, that's a different game for the board. You as a board will have to consider. Have we plateaued with growth? And you know, our middle school continues to grow. So the idea would be we have not, but you know, in the current year we may be flat, which is different for us in doing that school. So,
Superintendent, can you just speak? I'd love to have this at a public meeting where our capacity sits right now at Roosevelt High School. I think there is a rumor that we're at capacity. So I would just to get those numbers out at a public meeting so that that's clarified.
Yeah, I think great question, Dr. Johnson. The building itself, classroom-wise, was built for 1,350 students. I do think it's important to say that when design was fulfilled, I guess, in that building, there are your core spaces, your cafeteria, which if you think cafeteria is the hallway there, right? It's the common space, is set up for 1,600 students. And so that's something that long-range planning has wrestled with a lot is that the right avenue? Because you can add classrooms without having to add common general space. The gymnasiums are set up for 1,600. The Performing Arts Center is set up for a school of 1,600, the cafeteria is set up, so those are your general spaces. And typically when you look at building a new school, the most expensive spaces in a new school are things like your Performing Arts Center. So, so the way that was created was always with the intent to add classrooms. And so just something for boards to consider, but the capacity of classroom space on that site right now is 1,350 students.
And I think that was something that was done really well, planning for the expansion of RHS. I do, as we're looking at these plans, I know we've talked about it, but I'd like us just to share, what are our class sizes, our average class sizes at MIS and RMS? Where are we at class size?
So just on class sizes at the middle school and the high school?
The middle school and the intermediate school.
So at the intermediate school, they're in the mid-80s. Assistant Superintendent Kramer, can you check my?
It's third grade, they have 80.
Okay.
Fourth grade, 78.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. What's the average class size? So how many kids in each classroom?
22, whatever.
22
is divided by 4. Okay.
I think it's roughly 20.
I guess that's 20.
Just so the public.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at 22 students.
So one of the things
That's
I.
part of our contract.
One of the things I do want to call out, I do think the board made a decision to bring that building on. And I think if we go back to our early conversations with long-range planning, and as we talked with board members about what long-range planning is talking about, the biggest need the district had at time was elementary seats, because we had 3 elementary schools that were full. They were almost all at that 24, 23.25, where our tracker teachers said we've got to hire another teacher at grade levels, and we had to in some sense. When the board approved bringing back on MIS, that alleviated that problem. We have seats at Pioneer Ridge, we have some seats at Elwell now, and we have seats in Milliken. 20. If we're looking at 4 sections, that means at any grade level, we have between 12 and 14 seats open in grade level, just in Milliken. And we were able to bring all of the Milliken families that wanted to be over the school in Milliken. I think the other thing your decision allowed for the district to do from a financial standpoint was increase the support our district was providing to early childhood students. And when you think about wanting to help the district move forward, what we do for students before they come to kindergarten is we increased our early childhood seats by about 50% with that move, bringing MIS back on. So I just want to call that out, because I think that was a long-range plan decision this board made with an existing space that was powerful for what opportunities it provided the greater school district. And it freed up, so there's no conversation. Our earliest conversations was talking about place the next elementary school, because that looked like the need, and we were able to push that out a ways by the seats we created in elementary by bringing a building we already own back online.
And I would just answer for the middle school you asked, it's, I would say roughly upper 20s, 27, 28.
Thank you.
And I think it's also important to note that what we have found recent weeks is that our growth we thought would be going to Roosevelt High School, but the growth is actually going to Roosevelt Middle School, which we couldn't foresee happening, but that is what our current situation is. And so if this doesn't pass tonight, I don't think that it would be wrong to see if the long range planning committee would maybe look at what could be done for Roosevelt Middle School, because that just wasn't on our radar. It wasn't projected. We try to utilize the best resources, try to figure out where growth is. And we're just not guessing numbers out of a hat. We're making educated guesses, but in this case, the growth came at the school instead of the high school, which none of us could foresee happening. So I think that's an important piece to the puzzle is, as it states with the bond capital projected projects, Roosevelt Middle School isn't included in that, and we may need to look at the drawing board for future planning and look at what we can do for Roosevelt Middle School.
Well, there's projects for Roosevelt Middle School, just not classrooms. So
Correct.
there's other projects for upgrade information. Can you remind me the ages of the buildings of MIS and Pioneer Ridge, please? Because I can't remember.
Pioneer Ridge is 22.
Pioneer opened in 2004.
So 22 years on Pioneer Ridge.
MS.
Which part are we talking about? That's what
The
I'm thinking.
original building.
The average age of the building.
The original building is 1964. And then it's had a couple of upgrades.
And the
big deal is now the reason I think we went ahead and said, let's open that back up is because we got a new roof on that building a year and a half ago.
Yeah, my first
Something
summer.
like that. Because, I mean, MMS at the time had a lot of the same problems that Rick was having 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So honestly, of those projects up there, the one that I would be most in support of, other than Pioneer Ridge, because I hear about them daily. MIS needs to be redone. It just does. They're doing great work in that building. They're making it work. They're doing really good things. But that's the one project that if you were to go to a bond on this ballot, I would support that project because that is, I think, an important thing for the district long term is to remake that building into the elementary school we want it to be, not the one we're kind of forcing it to be. So, anyway, for what that's worth. Did that answer your question?
It did,
Okay.
because, when you look at average ages of schools, we don't, as a school district, our mission is educating students, not maintaining historical society. So we want to maintain buildings that are doing their job and not just buildings for buildings.
I think that there is wisdom in seeing how our numbers fluctuate as far as where our growth is coming from. I see a lot of wisdom in that before we tackle a project, is where is our growth really coming from? Are we going to see growth in early ed? Are we going to see it through our MIS, through Roosevelt Middle? So I feel comfortable being able to stretch this out and really recognize where our growth is coming from to determine our absolute needs.
Yeah, normally we don't disagree, but I'll disagree with you tonight. I want the voters to have an opportunity to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. I respect that. I do.
So for me, back in May, I think that when we had our presentation from long range planning. I came into that meeting. We have to get this MLO sunset thing figured out. That was my priority. And I was not really interested in hearing much about the bond. I was blown away the presentation that you guys did and the work that went into everything that you guys brought that night. And I'll agree with Vice President that those are the right projects. And that was so striking to me because I didn't even see that until you guys showed it to me. I know that seems kind of weird that I say it that way, but if anywhere, and people were asking me, where are we going to see growth? Where would the next bond project be? I was talking elementary schools, and I was talking elementary schools probably south of Johnstown. And then I saw that the presentation you guys gave, and I was blown away because I mean you guys identified stuff that I mean quite frankly probably wasn't on anybody's radar, but should have been. And so that alone said to me, this is a good committee, and this has to be a standing committee. I mean, we have to have you guys all the time, looking at what's going on. So first off, I just want to thank you for all the work you guys done. Josh, I know you've been a huge part of that. And I know she doesn't want to take credit, but she really did. But it's important work, and it exposes a lot of things that it's easy to overlook. And you know, we talk a lot about previous boards, and you know, if you don't know what you're looking for, you're never gonna see it. And I think that's a lot of what happened to our previous boards and our previous administrations is that, you know, the front door works, the lights turn on, the toilet's flushed most of the time.
Sometimes.
Where things are good. And weren't good because nobody was really digging deep and seeing, you know, where we were exposed, and where we were vulnerable. So I came to a meeting. I was a no bond guy. I don't want to do the bond. Don't want to do the bond. Came out of that meeting and put on some Pollyanna glasses and said, "Heck yeah, we can do this." That was with her. You know, sitting back and over the summer and reviewing stuff. Obviously, you know, I go with Superintendent Nielsen a lot about these things. Visiting in other districts in the region. I'm leaning more towards, I think there's still some more information that we need to get before we can commit. I think these projects are right, and these projects will always be, until they're taken care of, these are going to be projects on that list. These are the things we have to, like Vice President Sassano said, it might be next year that we come back to ask, it may be 2 years, it may be 3 years, it might be 5 years. But those projects have been identified, and I think those are valid projects that have to be addressed. For me, the big concern is, and I keep going back to where I was about a year ago when I had people saying, you know, where are you seeing growth in this district? Where are you seeing the need? And I was saying the southwest corner of our school district. And I think there's still a lot that's going to happen in the southwest corner of our district. I'm a little more concerned right now about the northeast corner of the school district.
With the Catalyst project.
The Catalyst and Cascadia project, there are all kinds of folks punching themselves in the head trying to get that project going. And when it does, when and if it does, our school district is right across the street, right across the highway from it. And I mean, if you drive up there right now, I mean, we've already seen how they have that platted. We've been promised school sites with previous developers there. But I mean, they are putting signs on that property right now, for residential multifamily sales. And that changes the dynamic big time. If we have families moving in up there, that changes things transportation wise. That changes things about locations of schools. I don't know necessarily that we build schools there, but we've got to build schools closer to there. And so there is just so much happening right now in our region that I think the wisest thing that we can do is take a beat and watch and see. And I know that's going to sound crazy. If anybody listened to recordings from this board 6 years ago, we condemned the people who used to say wait and see and watch and see. I think that's the most prudent thing for us to do, is to kind of watch and see what's happening up there, because that project there could radically change how all of this looks, and how they get prioritized.
It could, but these projects will still be on our list.
And
they'll cost 150.
They still let, and to that piece, and I don't want to disparage anybody by saying this, but our taxpayers don't necessarily care how much it costs, what the total bill is. They care about the cost that they have to pay. And as growth comes, the amount that everybody pays becomes smaller. The cost will go up. There's no doubt about that. There's no question about that. But if more people are paying for it, the individual burden becomes less. And we've seen that. Scott even had a slide that showed what, if we'd have passed the last bond today, what those first few years would have actually looked like. And so I'm not really concerned about the escalation, because we're never going to beat that. That's something that we cannot go. But doing the right project at the wrong time is still the wrong project. Does that make sense? Did I say that right? So the projects are right. I just don't think the time is right for me. We forgot, we didn't ask you guys on the MLO stuff. Do you guys have any other input that you wanted to provide, especially on the bomb?
I just have a smaller question about just the need of an expansion at Roosevelt, because we aren't at the 1,600 capacity, like getting close to the 1,500 capacity classrooms. But factoring in the fact that many students off blocks where they're not necessarily in classrooms. So that might lower each period down by 100 students, which is a lot to grow within a couple of years or even 5 years. So maybe factoring in can help readjust how important that project is and timing of it.
That's a good point. That's something that we've kind of talked about before, is that off block plays into that, but our work-based learning, apprenticeships programs, things like that are taking students out of the buildings. We have students who are even going into over to the at Ames and doing some of their schooling there. So yeah, there's a lot of factors like that that actually take kids out of the building, which free up some space.
The other piece I'd add to that we worked hard as a district. This online learning or the hybrid approach used to happen at Weld and took a classroom offline. And we actually expanded, so we have classroom over in Milliken, the same thing to happen. We've looked at other ways to have classrooms that can impact students that aren't at that building. So again, those are things we can pay attention to and watch. And I think I shared with some board members that if in fact we get to replace, many districts have also added an extra period on the backside, right? We start early, so you can add a 9th period or a 9th and a 10th period, allow you to spread students out a little bit. So in addition to all periods, you have mechanisms to get to that other spot. I think if you talked to administration, they feel more strapped than 1350 right now. That is not atypical when you're trying to use a building. But there are ways for us to continue to use the building to get to if we decide we're going to have classrooms.
I just wanted to ask about teacher classes per their contract at each different school, and if there are current buildings. I know some buildings have slightly less. I think say MIM was at 20 and RMS 28. What are their for each school? What is their class size maximum for their contract? Ensure that we're not at or above that contract.
So in kindergarten through 3rd grade, we keep the number at 24 or less. In 4th and 5th grade, it's 26 or less. And then as we go to middle school and high school, it's kind of how many students they have throughout the day. So they might have 4 students in one class period and more in another.
Okay. And we're not at or above that as of yet. Okay. And it's not expected this year with our expected growth that we saw last week. So
that becomes very expensive for us real fast, because if we have to add staff, I mean, that it gets really expensive for one kid. I mean, and that's the way it works. I mean, if we have a classroom that has 23 students in it, by that contract, we have to put another teacher in the building for one kid. And that math doesn't work at all. So yeah, having the space and having the staff right is, that's harder than trying to pick where to build a building. right? I mean, and again, you don't know it until they start walking in the first day of school, what it's gonna actually look like. All right, guys, if there's any more discussion, we do have the resolution in front of us. We have 2 sample motions depending on how you want to move on that.
I'm going to move to deny the resolution authorizing the placement of a ballot question before voters at the November 3rd, 2026 election regarding a bond measure.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Similar to the last one, a yes vote would be in favor of the motion to deny adopting the resolution. Ms. Diagano, would you please pull the board?
Monica Johnson,
Yes.
Amanda Proctor.
No.
Keith Sano,
Yes.
Ian Musgrave, Michael Weld.
I want to vote with you, but yes. Motion to deny carries. The resolution that. Do you guys want to take a quick little recess? Yeah, let's do that. We'll go ahead and it's 7:52. Let's just take let's take it to that. I don't care about hitting it at 8. You ready? All right, well, it's 8:01. Look at that. We still had a minute to go. I'm rushing this. 8:01. We'll come back to the regular session. We'll move on to our next item, which is the consideration of the ever-running fire alarm detection system protocol. Superintendent Nielsen.
Thanks, President Wales and board members. Tonight, we've got Mr. Roseberry here to help us walk through an option. We have a fire panel at Pioneer Ridge that needs to be updated. Josh, is that the right way to say it? There's some challenges. We have duct tape and chewing gum been able to kind of continue to limp along with it. But now we're at a point where we can't get parts because it's now past life cycle. And so one of the things we're asking tonight is we currently have an Everon system there. We have some options. We could go out for an RFP. The problem with an RFP is right now, and I'm going to say this, Josh, and you correct me if I'm saying it incorrectly, but the Everon system, because it's what's running the whole building, whoever would win the RFP would contract with Everon because it's proprietary, which would add cost. Or they'd have to overhaul the whole system and go away from Everon, which would make it way more expensive. So the recommendation is, the team have looked at it, would be to move forward with an Everon system directly with Everon because it's the most economical for the district. But we wanted to bring to the board and get feedback from the board on what direction you'd like us to go. Again, for us, this equipment right now, where it's sitting, is safety. So we think it's pretty pertinent to get the work done ASAP, given what we're looking at right now. But I'll let Josh talk more, and he's also here to answer questions. Josh, why don't you fill in the gaps with?
So some background, what began as a simple repair has turned into a nightmare. Just from code compliance standpoint, PRE is aged out. And so if we were to mess with anything life safety wise, to automatically trigger code compliance, which means what I'm looking at repairing is the visuals of the errors in the classrooms. What code states is if I touch it, I have to upgrade everything. That means I have to upgrade all the enunciators and all the flashers to current fire code, which is basically what we see in the new schools today. However, that does not work with the current fire panel that's at PRE. That simplex panel is 20 plus years old. So then you have to trigger code compliance to upgrade your fire panel. But that also does not jive with the NAC extenders in the building. So then you have to replace NAC extenders. That also does not jive with the current duct detectors or the smoke detectors. So then you have to upgrade all that. So our rep at Front Range Fires, Kurt Nakata, Kurt and I have been talking about this for a couple of years. What can we do, as a district, what can we do? And we keep coming up against the code compliance, the code updates. No matter what I touch, I have to fix everything because nothing talks to each other anymore. It's just too old. Nothing would jive. I'd have to update everything just based on the new fire standards. And so no matter what I do, if we go to Everon or anyone else, when they go put a permit in, let's say if they went to put a permit in to make all these enunciators the same, Kurt's going to ask, okay, what about your fire panel? What about your smokes? What about your carbons? And they're not in compliance. So then they would have to come back to the district and say, it's going to cost more to get all that into compliance. So what you're looking at is a key of roughly 165 grand to bring all of it into compliance. All those devices I've been talking about, including the panel. And it would happen at night. So this is also all night work because it needs to happen during the school year. This is not something we can keep pushing down the road. So that is kind of what we're asking for tonight, is kind of some feedback around the RFP process. If we were to go out to RFP, it's not that it would not be competitive, but like Scott said, they would have to then contract Everon to come back and actually program everything because it's Everon's equipment. And currently all is Everon equipment. So that's kind of where we're at. unfortunately.
So after we discussed this at our planning meeting, I reached out to Andy Stein and Jay Hoskins from Capital Construction Assistance and asked them about any emergency grants because it seemed like it would fit into that. Andy responded and he just said that there's, they don't have a cycle going right now because in the past, I know we've taken advantage of that. Like when we replaced some of the air handlers at MES, they were doing I don't know, for lack of a better term, a special. They had some additional need that was coming out of ESSER grants, and they were using that for any school district that needed to upgrade air supply systems in schools, and so we took advantage of that. So I was kind of hoping there might be something else going on that they might have that we could take advantage of. He said there's not. He said they do have an emergency grants that are available. They have $1 million a year that they can work with. But reading through what he said, it's a pretty bar for us to meet, I think, based on this. That all being said, you've with Jay before, haven't you? You might just reach out to him and ask him, tell him the details of what's going on. It would be worth pursuing that because, we probably could get, if we qualified, it could probably pay for about half of it. Andy says basically in his email is that the facility basically has to be at the verge of condemnation for them to step in.
So I would just like to say to the board that Josh has also done the same, working with the emergency manager for Townstown to try to leverage the resources they have around what's available grant-wise. And there's some things that potentially she's offered, but it sounds very similar, don't you think, Josh, to what President Wells is saying, that there's the cycles, everything's off cycle right now.
A lot of things are off cycle that we would also, since this is it's an expense we weren't planning, right? So it's like, what money do we have for matches is another thing to consider. And then, or the grants that are available for this kind of thing are very small. So, but she's been, her and Stacy have been great. They're trying to find something for us.
Poweron doesn't have a new product line that they want to showcase and looking for a school to test on.
That would be nice.
So Josh, I just want to make sure I understand. I read through everything. This roughly $165,000 gets us basically an entire new fire alarm system average.
Yes.
Yeah. Including all the things that currently aren't top in the future because they're so old.
Correct. Yeah, it would be replacing your fire panel, which is your point of contact, your fire, what I call the enunciators in the classrooms. So that'd be your strobe and your light. It also needs to be communicative. So it's going to schools where it says fire, X the building, fire. So it has to have that voice to it. All that would be upgraded to the school, the carbon monoxides and smokes, and the neck extenders would all be.
Okay. State of the system now. We've got 500 kids in that building right now. If there was a fire, would the system work?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. It would work.
But
I'm losing the enunciators and the visuals in some areas. So
okay, so in
those
some places,
on the wall.
In some places that's frozen, not going to go off. But
Correct.
the alarm in the building
Still does.
is working.
Correct. And that's kind of like where I said before, it started small. I just want to fix that.
Right.
But I can't. So.
Well, so that brings my next question then. Is this something we could have seen coming and budgeted for, or is this?
This was originally the 2020 bond, but got cut for cost. So it was deferred to, unfortunately now, it didn't make it to the next bond.
Okay. It makes the point for us, right? That we can't let these things degrade to a point where we're not today, but in a year or two, it's continuing the way they're going. We could be putting kids in danger at Pioneer Ridge, right? We can't let things get to that point. So we have to have a cycle where we're looking at major costs like this and making sure that, I don't know the words you use, but the one thing's talking to the other, so that we're not putting kids in danger. So I get it. That's the mindset I think we've started to make over the mindset shift. We've started to make over the last few years, but we're not quite there yet because frankly, this should have never been pushed off. It should have been in the 2020 bond. It wasn't because of probably cost escalation that we were dealing with at the time because we were looking at crazy numbers from COVID and all those kinds of things. But we should have seen this 3 or 4 years ago, probably. Or taking care of 2020. And that's not meant on anybody in the room. It's just, it is what it is. But this, for us up here, this is the kind of thing we have to be thinking about so that we don't get into a situation where we're putting kids at risk, staff at risk. So we got to do it. We got to fix it. And that leaves my other question. So you said this cost is the cost to replace the entire system if ever on this company did. If we put it out to bid, which is what our policy would require, technically, what I heard you all say was that we'd still be spending about $165,000 on equipment and labor and all these things. And then we'd have to pay Everon to come in to program it all.
Because it's their equipment.
Do you have, and as I'm asking you to look in your crystal ball and give us numbers that might change, but do you have a sense of what that additional cost would be if we went that?
You're usually looking around 20 to 30.
So if we put it out to bid, the point of which is to get a better cost. We're actually going to end up getting probably, we don't know for sure, it's maybe worth doing it, I don't know, but we could end up spending more to fix this issue if we put it out to bid.
Typically what would happen at that point is that company, let's say Joe's company bids, they're cheaper. We, as the board decides, let's use the cheaper bid. It's good bid, let's go them. But that also means now they're our monitoring company for that school. Whereas right now, we have Everon at every building. When we've already gone through the whole firing of JCI and getting Everon in place, because Everon was the better bidder. And so now we're starting that process. Now we have 2 separate bidders rather than one source.
And that, I mean, many of us weren't here when that happened, but that was a big deal, getting from one company or several companies to one, especially for fire.
Yeah, when I started, we had 4 monitoring companies. Now we have 1.
Thank you.
And can a different, if you get Joe Schmo Company to rent PRE, can they work on an Everon? Yeah, they can.
No. So they would subcontract
Just subcontract it out to someone who can work on the Everon. Okay.
So we're paying somebody else.
So you said you brought this up 6 years ago?
4 years ago.
4 years ago? You all know my position on all these emergency expenses. What can we do better for you? Because you knew, so I'm assuming that was communicated, obviously communicated, because you asked for it. We need to be more responsive. And what can we do to be more responsive to you? Because this, we should take into account this content. And
I think
I mean, this is the first time I've seen it.
Right.
So
what's hard about this one is this one didn't initially start as, we need this right now. When it got cut out of the bond for cost, everything still works. To this day, it still works. What I'm having trouble with is like the outside ones aren't working and the hallway one isn't working. So I have like 4 that I need to fix and I can't fix them. And then as you uncover the code compliance thing, this starts to grow into a bigger issue. So while I was on the radar back in 20, as unfortunately got cut, you know, it's still working to this day, and it should still theoretically have another 5 to 10 years life out of it before it goes completely kaput, as you're saying. And it's when I want to just repair 4, I can't. My hands are tied. So in this case, it's not only an emergency because it's a life safety issue. It was something that I didn't even see because of the code compliance updates. I knew eventually we needed a new system, but nowhere in my thoughts would fixing 4 strobes all of a sudden cost the district $165K. You know, that's awful.
if we have failing parts of the system, would that help getting some grant money? Would that lead to, when you're talking to your the fire chief, would that condemn the building? I mean,
No, it wouldn't. So we would have to take some measures because it happened at it happened before I got here at Ledford, but they would put us into what's called firewalk, which is expensive for the district because then what we did at old Roosevelt High School, we had to take custodians and we have 24/7 coverage in the building where custodians have to walk every hour, mark a form, and I send it to the fire. And so everything would still act as normal. We would just have to take the appropriate measures to make sure we're doing the firewalk. We wouldn't condemn it. It would just, you've got some work to do, is what he would say.
And so what I'm hearing you, Josh, though, is we're at the beginning of the process that Amy and I are talking about right now. And what you would have come to us and said is we replace 4 of those things, $200 probably.
Yeah.
Each.
Correct.
But really, because of the code issues, now it jumps us to the end of the process.
Correct.
That we would have been at 5 years from now.
Correct.
So.
Unfortunately. There's been a few code updates to the building international codes and fire codes since we carried. Just a few.
And Josh, do you have an idea of what it did cost in 2020 or 2021 when the project went down?
Yeah. When I started, LO and Roosevelt were being built.
Okay.
So I don't know what it would have cost, why it was cut. Those were all decided before and stuff. Make up a number.
So I guess the question for us is what you asking for, I think, is to be cleared out to bid or not. Really is the 5 prosecuting answer.
Our policy requires no different.
Except for.
Except for any emergency.
Yeah, I think the policy, because I pulled the policy, it said that we have to bid, right, except for the following instances will be exceptions. There exists only one responsible source. That's kind of like this, because there's a lot of different fire companies. Purchasing with other school districts, or if the service is a professional service that requires a higher degree of professional skill.
Does it change timelines much if you're coming out to bid? I mean, it would be a several-week process.
Well, we meet on the 2nd.
Sure.
We meet in 2 weeks. You could do a quick 7-day up and down bid.
Amanda, are you thinking just to table this and see if we get any responses so we can compare?
Yeah, so I think I am leaning that way, and part of it is not that I don't care about fire or anything like that, but kind of leaning a little bit what Amy said is that we did know about this system getting close to end of life, and due to a lot of different reasons, multiple reasons, we waited until now to do it. So I'm not sure, like, we didn't see it not coming. It's like hearing the wobbly wheel on your tire and you're like, it's gonna be okay. It just ended up not being okay. And so I think since we meet in 2 weeks, I feel comfortable with doing it, asking you to do a 5-day open bid window, 7-day open bid, what you decide. I think there's enough time in 2 weeks to do an open bid, because our bidding procedures require a minimum day of open bid. But I also think that that's the spirit of the policy alive as well.
I agree.
I can do that, no problem. That's why I came to ask. And then the Musgrave's point about, like, you'll want to see this kind of stuff come up, you know, and what the board can do better, like with all the new builds and everything we got with the basically everything wiping to zero, if you will. You know, the district before didn't really have any means of tracking anything, equipment-wise, and we do have all of these now, and we do have those planning processes in place. So when Rusty and I need to sit and say, okay, what's coming up next year? Here's my 2 things that within 1 or 2 years it's going to fail. Here's my 5, 10. Here's 10 plus. You know, and as the year by, you know, that gets smaller. So this one actually wasn't that.
And I think you guys did a great job with the preventative maintenance, really getting everything on track. And I know you had a lot of work. Because it just wasn't, so blame's not on you. I just want to know what we can do and then bring it. I want us to hear you.
I appreciate
When you're coming to us. We need to know what you're saying. So I appreciate this, but yeah, let's do the good. I think we should do the good process, just so we stick to policy.
And then that does allow you to do a 5 or a 7, so do we have a preference?
Double check the policy first, but I didn't see anything.
Do we need some kind of?
Probably have to motion to table.
No, we just, again, we do have a motion, to approve or deny. The ask is for the approval, so making no motion would just let the item die, but, by giving direction to the board. But you know what I think about it is because this is special business. Actually, we should make a motion to carry it forward so it can become old business.
You got it, Amy. You got it.
So I'll motion to table this item until our September 2nd meeting, while giving direction to our facilities to complete that bid process at that time.
Second.
A motion by Vice President Sassano, a second by Director Proctor to table this item to the September 2nd meeting. Any discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Josh. I know this doesn't anything for it. Appreciate it.
Hearing no other comments, Jessica or Ms. Diagana, I'm sorry. Hold board.
Yes.
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 Thank you for milking it along over the years.
We'll move on to our next item, which is the first reading of a slew of proposed updates to board policies.
President Wales, board members, we have some policies that have been recommended to be updated. We've gone through a bunch. These are the ones we felt like needed to be put in front of you for first reading this evening. I think it's important. It looks like a lot more than it is. I think I'll call attention to JKA. There's a red line version copy. JKA E-1 and -2. Those two, KA and JKAR, have some updates and replace those other two. So those other two, the recommendation for us is that the E1 and E2 we repeal. So that takes care of the JKA through JKAR. I think it's we get down to the clean and redlined immunization of students. That policy, we have a policy in place. That's the regulation. We met with nurses in the district to guide us in how we felt like our current policy was with the recommendation. We felt like it lined up without any adoption, without change, but they felt pretty strongly that the regulation here was a little cleaner and a little shorter than what we have now. So their recommendation was to bring that regulation forward. In the child abuse reporting, the clean and red line, you can see none of them are huge changes, but there is some substantive change to take that. And so we felt like in each case, these were, when we looked at the policies, the practices we have as a district already in place, but the policy, the way it's written, was a little cleaner I don't know, Assistant Superintendent Kramer, if there's anything you'd like to add to some of the shifts in these policies?
Just a couple real quick. The immunization one, it's not a change in practice. It's just some change in wording of what's in the policy. Child abuse reporting included a different category, which was sexual abuse.
Yes.
And that was not in our previous, it was in our previous policy, but not specifically called out. So those were a couple of things that I would add.
Again, as is always the case, is for us, we will have these posted online. I guess a conversation given which has happened with the September 2nd, which we should talk about before we close tonight, because the 2nd right now is a work session, so.
We have an agenda.
We have an agenda item already, so.
Don't be racing.
So we certainly could have first reading tonight. Our plan was second reading would have been the second meeting in September. Second reading now theoretically could be the first meeting in September. And again, for us, there wasn't in any of these policies shift in our practices, right? There's nothing that said we had to do things differently. We just cleaned them up and made them, in some cases shorter, in some cases getting rid of some policies is a nice avenue if we can pull that off.
So on the immunization, under medical exemptions, in the event of an outbreak of any communicable disease for which immunization is required, no exemption will be recognized when those students were excluded from school. So we have a measles case for taking all the kids out that aren't immunized. How does that work? Do they do online school?
Yeah, we would provide an alternative for them. And it may be online, it may be something like teacher provides work for them to do, something like that. And that's not a change, that's been.
I just didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think when you look at, I can't remember where the outbreak was, there was one Boulder, I think. And those, talking to individuals down there, those students were out for 21 days.
On JKA, the use of physical intervention and restraint, under restraint, if damage may be involved, restraint may only be used when the destruction of property would, you change it from could possibly to would. But I put our staff in a position like how could I definitively know that something, that a destruction of property would happen? If somebody's coming at me with a bat, I don't know they're gonna smash all the chairs or me, but that's probably what they're doing. I'm just worried that wording puts our staff in a difficult position because none of us definitively know what another person's intent is. We have to use our best judgment in those cases. So that was just one word change that I thought could put staff in a predicament, because the argument can be made, you never definitively know. I mean, until the destruction's actually done.
Yep.
Where is that again?
So it's JKA, and there's physical intervention and then you go to restraint right underneath it. It's in the second paragraph.
So I would just say that our legal team is who helps revise the policy. I know what you're saying. And could possibly or would, I think, can be either way. When you're in a situation like that, you say, oh, could this possibly be, or would this? So I see exactly what you're saying. I don't know, that, I mean, that's what they recommend. It doesn't mean we have to use that word, you know. So we often do what they recommend. Just because.
Sure.
advice is typically, why is this?
Move to, it says approve, we're not really approving the policy yet.
You're approving it for you're approving it to be presented for the first reading.
I really want to say so. I move to advance the board policies presented for first reading and directly back for second reading. With any revisions as appropriate.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice President Sassano, a second. Director Johnson to advance the aforementioned policies for second reading. Any discussion? Motion?
The only thing I wanted to add, as the city said, it popped into my brain, so I apologize. I think I would prefer these to be out for at least 30 days or something. I feel like it's much too fast to just do 2 weeks for the second
That
reading.
puts us back, yeah, I think Steph's better about that.
Are there's not a legal requirement we update these quickly?
All of them are as soon as practical. It's not right. It's late.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Dugan.
Yes.
Samantha Proctor?
Yes.
Lisa Sano?
Yes.
Amy Wesker?
Yes.
Michael Wood?
Yes. We'll move on to our final item of special business, and that is the consideration of the September 2nd school board meeting format. Superintendent Nielsen.
Initially, we had this, so we could consider if in fact we decided to move anything forward, given the bond considerations, which you ended up making tonight. And given the item from Josh, I think, making this a special meeting on September 2nd, which will allow us to take action on the fire panel. The general format of the meeting that night is planned to be a work session, so.
If we do a work session, do a special meeting followed, or work session following a special meeting,
Yeah, I
just
think,
so that we can make sure that we can address.
I think our plan would be, as we did, I think once last year, where we would do a special meeting on the front side, take the action item we need to take, and then move into the work session.
I'll move to change the September 2nd, 2026 board meeting from to a work session with the inclusion or with the added addition of a business meeting in order to allow board to conduct any necessary business.
We have a motion by Director Johnson, second by Director Musgrave to add, you mind if I just say that, add a business
If you
meeting
want to say it simpler.
to our calendar for September 2nd. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Diagano.
Yes.
Samantha Proctor?
Yes.
Lisa Sano?
Yes.
Amy Wesker? Yes. Michael Wood?
Yes.
All right. We have no new business. Do we have any citizen comments on general topics? We'll check her out. All right. So, any future requests? What the?
I know.
Okay, not even ready for this. How do I? Here to request. Remember, and all you're doing is making the request. You're not Arguing for or against them?
I'm just making it.
Yep.
I'd like to make a request for a work session to occur. I think they can in the same work session. I would like a work session for the board to hammer out and decide on a specific superintendent evaluation, the way it's going to be completed, and the cadence it's going to be completed. I'd also like in that work session to discuss the superintendent goals as per his contract. By November, the board is to set goals for him. So I think this work session may need to be elevated, but I want to ensure that in the work session, we can also discuss the superintendent's goals for this upcoming school year.
Okay. Just as a note, we haven't set a prioritization for these agenda requests yet. And what you're asking for kind of falls outside of that because it is a little more timely than that. So we'll work on in our planning to develop this in our next work sessions.
Yeah, this feels like one that we should get on the rhythm for board annually.
Yeah. Nice work. All right. Anything else? I will adjourn us at 8:38.